Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. And just before introducing myself formally, let me please inform you that this session will be recording. And well, today I'm will be, moderating this session. And as I was referred to, I can see everybody watching at me. My colleagues, we have now 19 participants, and we still, I guess, waiting for more to come. But anyway, without burning our limited time, let me continue. So my name is Vladimir Tsirkunov, and I'm a lead specialist and, as already mentioned, the head of GFDRI and World Bank HydroMet program, which supports development countries' efforts to improve delivery of HydroMet information and early warnings. And today we will discuss inclusivity of the risk communication. This is quite innovative and challenging issue. And we're all aware that there are certain groups of people, particularly in developing countries, who have limited access to risk information and missing life-saving early warning information. There are good news, of course, that there are some pioneers who are working on these issues globally. And today we have the opportunity to learn from the great panel, which our team put together and who will report to you in a minute. But before presenting the panel, let me introduce our manager, Mr. Abbas Cha, practice manager of the climate change and disaster risk management in South Asia region. And he will open the session. With this, Abbas, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Vladimir, and thank you, Keiko, for the invitation. So I'm going to speak briefly about this topic of social inclusivity in disaster risk management and early warning systems. So first of all, I wanted to say that hydrometeorological services is possibly the fastest growing part of our business in South Asia. And Vladimir and I go back a long way. I think we started working together in Turkey about 12 years ago. And Hydromet services was then a novelty, and probably Vladimir was the only person in the bank doing it. And now we have a flourishing team of experts across the globe. Now, I want to begin with a story, which is in 2008, if you remember, two super cyclones hit Myanmar and Bangladesh. So Cyclone Nargis hit Myanmar, and Cyclone Sidr hit Bangladesh. And the differences could not be more stark. Hundreds of thousands of people lost their lives in Myanmar. And while in Bangladesh, the toll from Sidr was in the thousands, which is a tragedy. Every single life lost is a tragedy. But with the same intensity, Bangladesh managed the disaster much better, with much less loss of life than Myanmar. Now, this year, 2020, it's a significant anniversary, which is that it's the 50th year of Cyclone Bhola hitting Bangladesh, where again, hundreds of thousands of people lost their lives. But after Bhola, Bangladesh invested heavily and significantly in early warning systems. And most importantly, in this last mile connectivity. So getting credible early warnings into the community in a way that the community responds is perhaps one of the biggest challenges. And I think Bangladesh is a stellar example of a country really tackling this problem and dealing with it successfully. It's really impressive what they've done. I think India has also done a very good job on this front. So there was, in this year only, Amphan hit India quite hard, but the loss of life was minimal because, again, of these very forward-looking investments that the country has made. So let me just share my screen with you, and I wanted to share some really heartwarming paintings. I hope you can see, by a young colleague of ours. So this is by a young artist from Nepal, whose name is Piyush, and he's actually the son of a colleague of ours, Sulochana. And he is basically visualizing what early warning systems means in a community. So this, for example, is a an old lady living in a mountainous region who might be a minority. who is completely cut off from communications. This might be somebody who's handicapped, who's might be stranded in a strong storm with nobody to rescue them. And this could be somebody caught in a mudslide suddenly in, again, a mountainous remote region. So I want to thank Piyush for sharing his art, but this kind of underlines the big challenges we have. The last mile connectivity is often the most difficult for the most vulnerable parts of the population, the handicapped, female-headed households. These are often very in remote areas, and they're hard to reach. So this is quite a challenge for us, but I think we have a fantastic panel ahead of us, and who will give and share examples of how countries have dealt with this issue. So thank you very much again to the panel and to Vladimir, and back to you.
Thanks, Abbas. Well, as you mentioned, Hydromet, where I work, and the World Bank is indeed a growing area of investments for the governments, developing countries specifically around the world. As of today, we in the World Bank supporting well over 70 countries globally, and total size of our portfolio is over 1 billion, and that's for improvement of better climate information and services for better decision-making by the governments. And one of the main areas of our investments is improving the early warning and message delivery systems. That's very close to what we will be discussing today. Essential element of the system has standard message delivery mechanisms using text messages or other instruments. However, we are also aware that there are people who struggle to receive and understand standard text messages. And while many governments have started to adopt Common Alerting Protocol, CAP, which enables early warning messages delivery to multiple platforms at a time, including platforms with accessibility features to persons with disability, it's not very common to have a message dissemination solutions for people with varying needs and capabilities. We consider that today's session is a great starting point to extend our thinking of inclusiveness of early warning information delivery. We will hear about innovative global practices from distinguished practitioners from Sri Lanka and the United States. And at the end of the session, if we are well disciplined, we may have some time for question and answer. And please kindly share your questions and reactions through the chat function during the session, and our team will try to, select the questions which would be relevant and pass it to you. So now I think it's a time for me to present our first presenter, who will be Ms. Sarah Babcock, Director of Policy and Communications at New Orleans Health Department. In this position, she oversees health policy, public health emergency preparedness, environmental health, injury preventions, and communications. She will talk about the New Orleans great experience of inclusive response and preparedness practices. Sarah, the floor is yours, please.
Hi, thank you, Vladimir. Good evening or good morning, wherever you are in the world. I'm going to share my screen here so you can see my slides, although I'll mainly be talking. Some of the slides are just great pictures of New Orleans. So I'm going to talk today a little bit about the way we have changed both emergency response in New Orleans, and then how that has changed our communication strategy so that we can better meet the needs of our entire community. And well, I'm going to put this in a little context here. This picture is of Hurricane Katrina making landfall in New Orleans 15 years ago. So just a little background about New Orleans, if you're not familiar. We are a mid-sized city in the United States. The metropolitan area has about 1 million people, but the city proper has about 400,000. We are often seen as a coastal city, but we're actually about 100 miles inland. But because we have really low-lying swamp area between us and the Gulf of Mexico, we often get hit just as hard by hurricanes, which is our #1 emergency here in the city. We are also, well, we're not actually an island because of our canal systems and because we sit sort of squashed between the Mississippi River and Lake Pontchartrain. You have to cross bridges in order to get out of the city. And as I mentioned, we are built on swampland that has been drained. And so we actually sit below sea level, which means things like when Hurricane Katrina came through, the storm itself didn't make that big of an impact, but many of the levees holding the water out of the city broke and flooded the city. And because we are below sea level, we require pumps to pump water out. And because there was no electricity and for a whole host of reasons, water sat in our city for about 3 months before it was completely drained out. You can also see in this picture, we have a small downtown area of high-rise buildings, but the majority of our city are single and double family homes across the city. We are fairly diverse. We are about 60% Black, 30% white, and then a primarily Vietnamese population of Vietnamese refugees, and then a growing percentage of our population is Hispanic, mainly from Central America, and about 80% of that population is undocumented and does not speak English. And we have about a 20% poverty rate in our city. So following Hurricane Katrina, a number of things were changed. And I also want to put into perspective that Hurricane Katrina hit 15 years ago in 2005 and really defined kind of how emergency management was created in the United States. So at the time the storm hit, emergency management was sort of a new field and really being handled by first responders coming together and not individuals with backgrounds in that field. But one of the first things that we did as a city was implement what we call EvacuSpots for a city-assisted evacuation program. We are one of the few cities in the United States that actually plan to evacuate the entire population prior to a natural disaster. So we have statues like this man hailing a cab across the city in neighborhoods. And our residents know that if they don't have transportation to get themselves out of town, maybe because they don't have a vehicle or because they may not have the financial means, or their car just can't get them very far, they can come here to this EvacuSpot in the 2 days leading up to a storm, and they can catch a bus out of town. But we know that not everyone is going to be able to use this model. And so we have worked hard as a city to identify our most vulnerable residents and make sure that they are able to be evacuated. Since the formation of our special needs registry, we actually have expanded it to make sure it covers all hazards. So we currently have about 3,000 people signed up on this list. We identify them through a variety of means so they can self-register with the city. We also utilize medical professionals, home health providers, community-based groups. We also register some people by their apartment complex instead of individuals. So if we have apartments that are all low-income elderly individuals, we'll work with those apartment managers to make sure we meet the needs of their group. People in this list tend to be a lot of elderly, a lot of people with disabilities, individuals who are oxygen dependent. They may need dialysis. They may be require a wheelchair or be bedridden. They may be blind or deaf, have other access and functional needs. They may have mental health needs, particularly untreated mental health needs or developmental disabilities, or they might utilize things like home health or hospice services. We also have a city, we have a city that has a lot of chronic diseases. And we also have a city with a significant amount of violence. And so we have a much larger than normal population that is kind of tends to be men in their middle age that are amputees or have other medical conditions due to gunshot wounds and other violence. So we tend to have a slightly larger percentage of people in our city that would need these services. People are able to register themselves, and we keep this information up to date. We update it annually. So we actually send them a birthday card every year and ask them to give us a call and update their information. And we communicate with them throughout the year, like I'll talk about. I will just mention that I know that registries can be controversial and they're not great for every setting. For example, if you have a city, New York City or Manila, you're just going to have way too many people to do this. This is really a good model for our small to mid-sized cities, particularly when you have an agency that's trusted to hold information. So we know that in different settings, some people may or may not want all of their information known. Here in New Orleans, we have found that most of our elderly individuals living alone really want us to know about them. They're worried that they won't be able to meet their own needs in an emergency. We also make sure we ask as little information as possible while still being able to do our jobs. So we ask for name, date of birth, address, phone number, and then we ask a number of questions about their needs. We do not collect IDs. We do not verify information. We don't collect social security cards or anything. We know that a large percentage of our Hispanic population does not want to know their information because they may be undocumented or untrusting in the government. So we actually tell people they can sign up with a fake name. As long as they answer by that name when we call them in the middle of a storm, they can do that. They can also put a friend's address if that's where they're gonna be when an emergency hits. So we've also completely redone the way we communicate with our community. So you'll see this little yellow diamond at the bottom of my slides. It says NOLA Ready. This stands for New Orleans, Louisiana. NOLA is what we call our city. And so we have created this NOLA Ready model, which is a platform for us to communicate with our residents. And this is all the information that's coming out from the city government. So you can see here in this picture, we're actually using this to not only communicate about hurricanes, but also right now, the COVID-19 pandemic. If there's tornadoes, we had a chilly night a few nights ago, so we activated our freeze plan. All of that comes through our NOLA Ready platform. One of the things we really want to make sure is that people trust the information we're giving out and come to us first for information instead of finding other sources. And so the main goal throughout the year is to constantly let people know that we are the option, that they can text their zip code to 888-777 to sign up for text alerts. They can go to ready.nola.gov to our website. They can follow us on social media, or they can call 311 and get all this information. We also spend a lot of time working with the community. We spend many hours throughout the year teaching about community preparedness, letting people know what to expect from their city government and what not to expect, what they're going to be responsible for, making sure that they have the supplies they need, and connecting them with either city resources or other community resources so that they have what they need and are comfortable. And again, drilling back down that NOLA Ready is the one place for information. We also make sure that we're trying to reach the whole community. So we have found in New Orleans that right now, the best way to reach people is through text messages. The second most common thing is social media, but we know this is not reaching our elderly populations. So this is why things like our special needs registry are so important. So we are able to turn those text messages into automated phone calls to be sent out. We've also worked really hard to make sure that all of the messaging, our website and our social media are compatible with devices for people who may have visual or hearing impairments, to make sure that people can see. Often if you post something as an image or a PDF, people are not, who have devices that may read to them, are not able to use that well. Often we actually test a lot of our messages out with our population to make sure that it makes sense. And finally, we work hard to make sure we are communicating during an emergency. So every emergency, little or small, we actually activate 24/7 phone lines. We proactively call our most vulnerable residents to check in on them, remind them that we are here, make sure they have all the supplies they need, but also so we can take their calls so that 911 doesn't get overwhelmed with all the little stuff that may not require fire, police, or EMS to come to them right now. So a good example is a few weeks ago, we had a hurricane come through. Hurricane Zeta came and really knocked the power out. Most homes were fine, no flooding, but we had a lot of people at home who were oxygen dependent, who maybe had CPAPs or BiPAPs or other equipment for nighttime. So we did a number of things in our response. One, we opened a shelter for people who needed to come there. We also opened charging stations. So if you just had medical equipment or a cell phone that needed to be charged, you could come plug in for an hour or two and then go back home. And we also created an oxygen distribution system. So if you were at home on an oxygen concentrator, you could go to a local fire station, pick up some oxygen tanks, or by calling our number, we would have someone from EMS actually deliver the oxygen tanks to your home. So by having this number, again, we are one centralized place where we're able to coordinate resources. We're also able to connect people if they have a home health or hospice agency that hasn't come out to see them. We can get on the phone and make sure they're coming out there and doing their job properly. The last thing I would just say is that often when you have power outages, your phone is not going to last very long. So the other thing we do if power outages are going to last multiple days is we have groups of volunteers through our Medical Reserve Corps that will actually go door to door. And because we have individuals pre-registered and we know which areas of the city are going to be most hit hard, and we know who's most vulnerable, we're able to really go into those neighborhoods and check on people. So thank you all so much for letting me present on both the changes in our response, but also our communication methods with our most vulnerable residents.
Thanks, Sarah. Very informative, and I had some feeling that you can continue for another hour and it will be still interesting, but because we have limited time, I probably will just pick up just one thing. There's multiple things which you mentioned, all important, but at the end, it seemed that it helped you to build a very high reputation. And this is a key thing. So you build a trust and people trust you, and that is probably one of the big pillars of your success. And that is something which we should take into account in designing our interventions. With that, let me switch to our next speaker, and that's Vance Taylor, Chief Office of Access and Functional Needs at the California's Governor's Office of Emergency Services. Vance leads California's efforts to integrate its world-class emergency management and homeland security systems to meet the dynamic needs of individuals with disabilities and people with access or functional needs. Vance is responsible for identifying and integrating the needs of underrepresented populations throughout every facet of the emergency management process. Through his leadership, California leads the nation in inclusive disaster risk management planning. With that, Vance, floor is yours, please.
Thanks, Vladimir. Appreciate it. And thanks, Sarah. Appreciate your remarks as well. Hey, everybody. So I'm Vance Taylor, as Vladimir said, the intro there, and I'm the chief of the Office of Access and Functional Needs, which is at the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services, which makes that a very, very long title. And I think in state government, I heard somewhere that, the longer the title, the better. So if that's the case, I'm definitely winning, right? If it's a competition. I will say it takes forever to print my business cards, but that's just another story for another day. It's a privilege to be with you, and I'm delighted to be able to present with my fellow panelists and to talk to you about California's model that we've developed for integrated emergency alert, warning, and notification. We go to the next slide. Excellent, thank you. I'm not seeing it switch over on my screen. All right, there it is, thanks. So throughout my presentation, I'm going to be talking about access and functional needs. You'll hear that term, or AFN. And I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, right? In terms of what exactly that means and who that encompasses. So when I talk about access and functional needs, we're talking about a lot of different individual populations. We're talking about individuals who have physical, developmental, or intellectual disabilities, people with chronic injuries or conditions, people with limited English proficiency, older adults, children, women in late stages of pregnancy, people in institutionalized settings, or people who are homeless, economically depressed, or transportation disadvantaged. So when we think about that, for us in California, with a state that has 40 million people, that actually makes up a significant number of individuals, all of whom are going to require some particular considerations in the way we plan and prepare and respond and alert and notify. Let's go to the next slide. So historically, as a global community, we've, I think, really struggled when it comes to integrating access and functional needs within our emergency management systems. And this was a hard truth that in the United States was given really a national spotlight. And that was, as Sarah was talking about, during Hurricane Katrina. And it was during that disaster we saw that out of everyone who perished, 70% of those individuals who died had an access or a functional need. And the reality is, it's not just during big disasters where we saw this, right? The truth is that while no two disasters are ever the same, that they may vary in terms of scope, scale, landscape, geography, climate, and countless other factors. Virtually all disasters disproportionately impact and affect people with access and functional needs. Let's go to the next slide. So understanding this harsh reality of how unfairly disasters impact our communities, California did something unprecedented. And in 2008, the governor leaned forward and created the Office of Access and Functional Needs, and then placed that within his Office of Emergency Services. So as chief, I serve as a senior level executive appointed by the governor to advise him and our director on how to do it better, right? How do we identify the needs all Californians are going to have before, during, and after disaster? And then once we've been able to identify and get our arms around them, how do we integrate them throughout every part of the state's emergency management process? It's a tall order, but thankfully we've got great partners that we work with on a daily basis to keep moving that forward. Let's go to the next slide. So a key component of the emergency management process is communication, right? Communication is always important, but during disasters, the ability to provide people with life-saving information as early and as quickly as possible is essential. So that's why having an effective emergency alert warning and notification system is so important. Right now, when we developed our system, we did so with the following realities in mind. First off, we understand that it does take individuals with access and functional needs oftentimes longer to evacuate, right? So if there's a disaster, you know, I get a message of alert, my neighbor gets a message of alert. My neighbor might just grab a bag, jump in a car and take off. But, you know, maybe I have to wait for my care attendant. And maybe I've got to pack up durable medical equipment. And maybe I have to wait until there's accessible transportation resources available to help me evacuate. All of that takes time. And while you're waiting for that time, you're just hoping and praying that the disaster in question doesn't make it to your front door before help arrives. And so we knew it took longer, which is why we had to push to have a system that moved quicker. We also understood that people consume information differently. The messages you push out, your alerts, your warnings, your notifications, are literally going to fall on deaf ears. They're literally going to go on a device that is before blind eyes. So if those messages aren't accessible, the life-saving information you send will not be effective. The impact of that is measurable typically in lives lost. The other two things we understood, they really go hand in hand. And it's that sometimes jurisdictions with great technologies will still miss the mark. And that's because staff aren't trained on when or how to send messages, right? We've seen jurisdictions where there's a fire, it's literally 3 in the morning, and they opt not to send an emergency notification. They opt not to use wireless emergency alert system. And that's for a variety of reasons. But one of the things that we've seen is that within that process of trying to determine, do I or don't I push it out? Oftentimes, what's overlooked is the impact that not sending it has on people with access and functional needs. It's, you know, what we hear from the deaf community when they tell us that they take their smartphones and they place it on their person before they go to bed, so that if a message comes through, the phone vibrates and wakes them up. But if the message doesn't get sent, they're literally asleep in their beds with sometimes fires raging all around them. It's a difficult reality, but it's their reality. And staff have to be trained to understand that and to view things from that perspective. Now, the other thing is that, you know, if you don't have training and capability, it's just going to be a rough go. So the two things, training and technology, they go hand in hand. Let's go to the next slide. I want to talk for a minute and just kind of emphasize what I've been saying about enhanced messaging. Essentially, you need the capability to make sure that alerts are going to be accessible for socially vulnerable populations. And in order for that to happen, you've got to utilize a system that allows for customization, right? Because you have to customize what goes out in order to ensure it meets people's needs. So the ability, and when I say customization, I mean things like what font are you using? What size is it? The vibration pattern when a message comes in, lighting, audible notifications. Each of these particular forms of access are going to benefit different populations in different ways. Your system has to accommodate for that. In terms of the actual system itself, you've also got to make sure that it's going to work in concert with the handsets that are out there, right? The actual devices people are using. And that it's going to work in concert with the carriers so we're actually transporting the message. So you just have to do that on the front end. You also have to make sure that the software that you're using allows you to query or survey the individuals you're messaging. In other words, it's one thing to push out an emergency warning or an alert or notification that says that you have to evacuate, there's a flood, or you have to go, there's going to be a power outage, or wildfire or earthquake, whatever it is. But it's another thing to say, push 1 on your phone if you need assistance, right? Push 2 if you need an accessible vehicle to pick you up. That type of information, that push and that pull, is so important because it lets you know where to send your limited resources. we've only got a few resources. Knowing where exactly they need to go is like having a metal detector that allows you to find a needle within a haystack.
Ben, sorry, can I interrupt you for a minute?
Yeah.
We'll soon run out of time. It's extremely interesting, but could you please approach the closing statements?
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. This is the last one. It's just a roll of data. That no matter what tool you have, it won't work unless you've got good data. The data you need is out there. It's with your partners. It's with service providers. It's with your private sector partners like Google. I'm seeing Leah here. And so that info is out there. You just have to work to coordinate with it. At the end of the day, this is all about coordination. It's all about partnership. It's about understanding that at the end of the day, we will succeed or we'll fail, but we'll do it together. So thank you.
Great presentation, Vance. I wish we would have another hour to listen because the devil is in details, and you unloaded some of most interesting things which would be relevant. But because time is really running out, so with that, I will turn to the next speaker. Do we have a next speaker ready? I hope so. And let me introduce Major General Sudhanta Ganasinghe. I hope I did mispronounce the name. And he's Additional Secretary, Disaster Management Division, State Ministry of Internal Security, Home Affairs and Disaster Management of Sri Lanka. He leads the national efforts of disaster risk management in Sri Lanka, including disaster risk mitigation, planning and preparedness, public awareness and dissemination of early warnings to communities, emergency response and relief coordination, as well as many other important functions. And he will talk about the new project that the government of Sri Lanka is starting in partnership with the World Bank. Major General, the floor is yours, please. You're muted, sir. Would you unmute yourself? Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, it has been kind of a busy night from Sri Lanka. You know, we had a very busy few days. Cyclone Bureni entered Sri Lanka last night, went across northern half of Sri Lanka, and as we speak, it's on its way out from the north west of Sri Lanka. Luckily, no fatalities, and we were fortunate. But of course, we had a sleepless night, and the entire disaster management center was working around the clock last few days. However, promise is a promise, so I thought I'll spend few minutes with you guys. So if I can have my first slide, I can quickly do because I have some more activities. Can I have the first slide, please? I think slides are shared with you.
Well, who is sharing the screen? Colleagues.
Keiko will share, Vladimir, give her like 2 seconds.
Okay, very good. Okay, it's on.
Right. Thank you. So next one, please. So as I started and as we are going through the cyclone Bureni, Sri Lanka is an island nation, highly vulnerable to hydrometeorological disasters such as floods, droughts, landslides, high winds, and like what we had the last night. And during 2015 to 2019, we had about 13.7 million people. Of course, the 13.7 million is cumulative number between the 4 years plus. and they have had some kind of disastrous effects on them. And as per assessment done by the World Bank risk financing teams, the annual average loss of Sri Lanka is approximately about 380 million. It's relatively high, but this includes mitigations and support assistance planning and all the other activities. Hence, this early warning plays a crucial role to protect people's lives and assets and from those natural hazards. And we are working very hard to develop the system to evacuate, educate people, deliver the early warning to vulnerable communities, and have system, new ways and means for the evacuation of such people. So can I have the next slide, please? For this, we have developed a new kind of a practical system on ground. Sri Lanka, as similar to all the other Asian countries, we have the government political structure, then the government official structure, as well as the military structure. So this is, they are like reaching the last man, last mile system. If you see here in the center line, we have Emergency Operations Center, that is my headquarters, my center, where we have the district secretaries, divisional secretaries, and so on, going right down to the rural village level. On the left side, we find that every area at divisional area and district area, divisional area, and the rural village areas, the political authorities getting connected with this system. And on the left corner, you will find the same, like early warning, SAR, and evacuation, and health and sanitizing communities. Now, these 4 items are in the all four layers of the community. That is where how we reach the last man, last mile. And the right side, you will find all immediate responders coming in, where the military, police, health, education, fisheries, public utility agencies, all these people. And final result we are targeting is no fatalities and no deaths. That's what we are trying to reach, and evacuate people by way of conveying early warning fast as possible to reach the last man, including people with different abilities. Next slide, please. So, why inclusive early warning systems is required in Sri Lanka? That's mainly because we have a higher rate of persons with disabilities. We have about 8.7 population with disabilities, where 43% of them are male and 57% are female. And most of the female percentage includes vision and mobility, and vision and mobility disabilities higher than the male. So they need additional support. They need support in receiving and understanding early warning messages, that is visual, hearing, cognitive challenges. Then they need additional time and physical assistance to evacuate due to limited mobilities and other challenges. So we are to look in for these areas, understand, identify these areas. That is why we are looking in advanced and more sophisticated, proactive, inclusive early warning systems to reach these vulnerable communities. Next slide, please. So what makes early warning system more socially inclusive? Here, the government of Sri Lanka, with the help of World Bank and international experts, analyzed and developed the current early warning system, policy and regulatory environment to identify opportunities to make the new early warning system more socially inclusive and accessible to people with different needs and background. Here I will elaborate in a number of steps. We have taken a couple of steps on this reaching last mile with disabilities and leaving no one behind. That is the main idea with us. So coming on to the next one, first point is, next slide please. So translating social inclusion concept to practice. Now here, Sri Lanka has had a strong whole of government commitment to social inclusive disaster risk management ever since our disastrous experience on 2004 tsunami. For that, for example, Sri Lanka National Disaster Management Plan 2013-2017 paid specific attention to vulnerable groups such as elderly, children, people with disabilities, and women. Further, disability inclusion was also acknowledged in the community-based disaster risk management component of the Sri Lankan Comprehensive Disaster Management Program 2014-2018. And despite all these high-level commitment and policies, support the development and implementation of inclusive DRM process, more efforts are needed to translate these high-level policy commitments into concrete action. As we all know, the policies plans are all very nice and good on paper, but when it comes to the implementation, the ground action, it's very difficult and it needs practical action plan. That is why in my second slide, I showed that action structure what we are developed in Sri Lanka, reach the last mile with center we have the government policy, then we have the political intervention, then we have the division, district level, division level, and the Gram Nirdhar. On the other corner, we have the military police, community support system, all these people coming in. The bottom line is it should not be top down, it should be bottom up when it comes to the activation. So that is the most important thing. Next slide, please. So coming from translating social inclusion concept to practice, next is making disaster risk management planning inclusive. So for that, to make the early warning system inclusive, it is important to have inclusive community level disaster management planning as the basis for the development of such systems. So each communities go down to last level layers and get their views, ideas. We have the community developed disaster management mitigation committee. So we get their ideas, we get their viewpoint, and we get the statistic. We get to know who's who and where and how. So that way we reach these people and get their needs. And really, this is people-centered meeting the needs of the people system, what we should be developing. So we are working on that. Then early warning system cannot be effective if there is no community level understanding and preparedness to utilize the warning messages. Therefore, it's critical for us to ensure the disaster management planning is inclusive right down to the vulnerable community. Next one, please. Next, action 3. Right. So coming from making disaster management planning inclusive, then we coming into the identifying and integrating the needs and capabilities of people into early warning system. Now, it should come from the people, and we are trying to mobilize the people from the community themselves, so that it's the village headman, the village man, the community man, the society man will be main custodian, main partner in kind of early warning message delivery system. That's why we say to design the early warning system socially inclusive, we need to first understand the needs and capabilities of people who receives the messages. There's no point giving a message to a blind person or a person with hearing disabilities. So we should identify these people and find a different way of reaching them. So this includes the group of people with special needs and limited capacities, such as like I just said, person with disabilities, elderly, pregnant women, children, then people with talking different languages, so on and so forth. Then it's critical to design the system, keeping these people's diverse needs and capability in mind to make the early warning system truly inclusive. And finally, I'm sure we will do a lot of consultation with various user groups to identify needs of the different groups while we develop such system. I'm sure all the partners, all our friends who are here discussing with us, the World Bank or the international agencies, of course, they will give us support, ideas, advisors. Even the technical support is required because Sri Lanka is a very small country. We need this kind of support to develop our system. Then come to the action 4, that is making diverse and making delivery and dissemination of early warning messages inclusive. Here we have one kind of long list. We understand that there are groups of people who may not be familiar with new ways of receiving messages of modern communication technologies. So there is a issue there, and everybody will not have smartphones. Everybody will not have communication telephone systems. So this one issue we have. Then we are also aware that standard messaging system, that text messages are not well studied by people with certain disabilities. Then definitely we need new and innovative ideas to disseminate early warning information to people with varying needs and capabilities, while also combining traditional communication channels as well as cutting edge technology. Then after identifying different users' needs, we plan to incorporate emerging technologies which enable the system to deliver the messages catered to people's needs. For example, there are technologies to read out message for visually impaired people. It will be a voice message, not a text message. And then we have kind of a different sound system like tsunami call, flood call, we'll say landslide call. We send out only the signal of that call. The music tells the people, okay, this music is tsunami evacuation, this music is landslide evacuation, this music is kind of a flood evacuation, or the early one is trying to develop different kind of tunes. We call it tsunami call, landslide call, flood call, kind of a new innovative things we are trying to say. So get people aware of this. Maybe in the fast sleep in the middle of the night, you may be having, if you are having visual disability, you will hear. If you are having hearing disability, you will see the text. So this kind of new innovative expedient methods, we call it in military, we have the expedient methods to reach people. So we are trying to reach all these things to meet people with disabilities and vulnerable communities. Then I think I'm coming to my last. I'm not trying to overtake your time. So Sri Lankan efforts towards inclusive early warning system, this is. So currently early warning messages are developed based on the hazard-oriented information and don't provide risk mitigation advices, so location-specific impact information. So that we have to work on, and we have to go through that and meet the needs. And the climate resilience program approach that CRES MPA will help bring a modernization to the system, which enable to provide location-specific impact-based information and navigate people to take appropriate mitigation actions in advance. And over and above that, what is shown on the slide are also very important. And I will not take time to read out what's on the slide. It's very clear and self-explanatory. And with that, I would like to thank you for having us, and thank you very much. We are developing a people-friendly system. We want the message to be conveyed to all vulnerable people, reach all vulnerable people, leave no one behind at any kind of disaster. This is what we did last night, and there were not a single casualty, no fatalities, only few damages. We have been working very hard, and with all your support, I'm sure. If I can have next slide, that final slide. So thank you very much. Sri Lanka is a very beautiful country, and hope you will visit us. And
Thank you, sir.
we are resilience oriented. We believe in prevention rather than cure. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. It's been a pleasure listening, all three presenters, but we have another one, and Leah, and I think so far every three were competing. Which presentation will be more exciting? Leah, you have a tough call. Please share a Google experience.
No pressure. Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. It's such an honor to be here among this very wise group. I learned so much, and I think I related a lot with a lot of the stories. I'm based in California, work at Google's headquarters here in California, but I'm originally from Brazil, and flood is a part of our life. So I have different experiences with different natural disaster and situations. But I work with accessibility for a very long time here at Google, and I'm focused on research and innovation. So I don't know if you have any specific questions, but I'd love to talk a little bit about some of the things that we're working on.
Yes, please, if you can share some accessibility technologies. We know that Google is one of the leaders here. Please give us something to, to
Awesome.
enjoy.
Yeah, I know you're running out of time, so I'll be fast, but if you have more follow-ups, I'll be happy to dive a little bit deeper. So in our research organization, we partner actually with a lot of products and a lot of teams, and we really believe that technology can make people's lives better and can really bring capabilities for people who have a disability or have lack of access. Disability is not the only, as we already learned today, it's not the only thing that can challenge access and communication for people who really need it. So for example, last year we worked on a lot of innovation for people who were deaf and hard of hearing. Live transcribe, live caption, and live relay for Android phones is a way where you can transcribe speech from a live conversation. So you just turn on your phone and it transcribes a text or a call or a video. So whenever you have text speech, you also have text and transcription if you can't hear the speech. And another aspect that's very important for access beyond disability is making sure that it works in other languages, right? As I already said, I'm from Brazil, so a lot of our products, we usually think a lot about not only translating, but making sure that they work in a local context, so localizing the context and making sure that it works with a local population and different devices, right? So Android devices have a very broad range of high-end devices, but also very affordable devices. We really believe that we can bring our technology to a lot of people and really benefit them from their day-to-day. Another very cool technology that we launched also for people who are deaf and hard of hearing is sound amplifier that amplifies sounds and filter noises and make it easier for you to hear. And also our captions, our automated captions on YouTube. We brought a lot of improvements over the years. It's a very complicated technical challenge. I graduated in computer science and I'm an engineer, but I'll try not to be too excited about the technical challenges. But it's like translating text and transcribing text is a very complicated computational challenge. But now on YouTube, we also have automated captions for sounds, not only speech. So for example, music, applause. And this is so important for someone who's deaf to understand the context of information that's going on. So that's another improvement that I'm very excited about. Another app that I really love, also for free on Android, is called Lookout, that uses computer vision to help people who are blind to understand what's around them. So you can use it, for example, to read letters or to understand like currency or food products. So if you're in the grocery store and you want to buy your favorite soda, you don't want to get the wrong soda, and you can't see, this app will help you out. I have a lot of examples. I'm trying to be fast. The last one that I want to mention, and happy to answer more questions, is Action Blocks, which helps make using a mobile device easier for people with cognitive impairments. So you can create blocks to translate a series of actions or actions that might be complicated if you have a cognitive impairment by just clicking a button. So yeah, I know we're out of time, so I don't want to take too much time.
Leah, thank you so much. I mean, all four presentations were exciting. Again, you're up to the task. I felt that if Google will continue spending its efforts and talents and invest into this, you can connect those challenges from developing countries to kind of new IT technologies and artificial intelligence and all that. So with that, again, recognizing the limitations of our time, I would like to invite Robin Mears, our Practice Manager, Social Sustainability and Inclusion from South Asia region, from the World Bank, and he will conclude this session. Please, Robin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Vladimir, and just a huge thanks to all the presenters. This has been truly an inspiring session. I know we're basically out of time, so I'm just going to have to keep these remarks extremely brief, but you know, we've learned so much from all the speakers, and what's so clear is you know, that it takes real effort, it takes learning from experience, learning from some, you know, quite horrific experiences in the past, such as, you know, this very striking statistic that 70% of those who perished in Hurricane Katrina were people with disabilities, people with access and functional constraints and other disabilities. And the experience from the 2004 tsunami throughout the Indian Ocean that affected Sri Lanka so badly. The experience that Abbas referred to at the beginning, Cyclone Bola in Bangladesh, that led to hundreds of thousands of people who perished 50 years ago. But what has happened since this is really truly innovating and putting into practice early warning systems that truly leave no one behind. This is what social inclusion means. That is the basis of it, is leaving no one behind. And this is how early warning systems will get to the point where there are almost no casualties, no deaths from a variety of hazards. I think the experience from Sri Lanka to just today, this is an incredibly timely conversation, but Major Sudhanta Ranasinghe has sort of shared with us, you know, the death rate is very, very low, down to about 3 people, as I understood from the news reports. Now that's 3 too many, but it takes a socially inclusive approach to get the numbers down to this point. And I'm reminded of this aphorism, you know, it's one thing to respect diversity of people's needs within populations. One definition is diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance. So that's what this is about. It's really about putting this, this learning and this experience into practice. This has been, as I say, a tremendously timely conversation. Today happens to be the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. Today in Europe and South Asia, that is, many participants are already in December the 3rd. Some of us are still in December the 2nd, but it's very timely from that point of view. You know, Major Sudhanta and his colleagues are grappling with a cyclone as we speak. Of course, this has been, as the Queen of England said some years back, the annus horribilis. 2020 has been a truly horrendous year, but has brought home to us all how much social difference impacts on how we can respond to people's vulnerabilities. The COVID pandemic globally has shown that it's vulnerable groups of various sorts who have been disproportionately affected, including in many circumstances, people with disability, people, you know, differently gendered impacts, and so forth. And so, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement in the US and elsewhere around the world has brought this home to us as well. So this is truly, it's been a very, very inspiring session. And just as I say, thank you to all the speakers for sharing these very, very valuable lessons from your experiences. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. And only can can repeat what was just said by Robin. It's indeed amazing session. Thank you so much. And even I learned a lot, even though I'm about to retire soon, but it's still interesting to listen to you guys. Thanks a lot.